This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the greatest movie of all time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome back our most frequent celebrity guest, the 13-time guest to the show with too many credits to name. Please welcome Christine Duncan. Getting pretty close to that 15 mark where you're going to have to gift yourself something.
Yep.
We also welcome our newest celebrity guest, the co-host of the War Starts at Midnight podcast. Please welcome new guest, Peterson W. Hill.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Unfortunately, that also means, as a first-time guest, you are subject to our opening guest questions. First question. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you love movies.
Yeah, so I am from Atlanta. Live down there with my wife and kids. Just finished working as a food and beverage director up in the Finger Lakes region, and I'm back down in Atlanta. Just started the Four Seasons Hotel actually today. And why I love movies. My dad took me for about 4 years, almost every weekend, to a different movie. And I was entirely too young to see some of them. Kind of like, have y'all seen The Squid and the Whale?
Oh, yes. Actually, I had recently watched it. Yeah.
Jeff Daniels is like, oh, yeah. You know, we'll just take him to, what is it? I think Blue Velvet. And the kids are like 10 years old.
Yeah. Okay.
So my dad took me to a movie like essentially once a weekend. He knew that was something I loved, and kind of carried it with me ever since. You know, went to film school, and yeah, I mean, you know, movies to me are just they're kind of the prism in which I view a lot of the world. It's a great way to step into somebody else's mind for a little bit and see kind of what makes somebody else tick and what makes this world interesting.
I think one of the underrated themes of this season is movies we've seen way too young as children. For Dad, it's like Rosemary's Baby and Jaws and, what was it, The Exorcist is in there. And for me, it's the whole 9 yards.
Oh, well, I mean, to keep it kind of Fincher related, I definitely saw Seven.
Oof.
So it came out in 95, I believe it. And
Yeah.
I was 9. I probably saw it when I was 10. So... And
that was the 90s. I saw Austin Powers with my friends in middle school.
Yeah, and part of it too is I had 3 older siblings who were 4, 5, and 6 years older than me, so I just watched whatever they watched. Yeah, I mean it is fun, kind of looking back and thinking, man, as a parent now, I'm not going to let my daughter watch 7 in a year. That's not going to happen.
Thank God for parental controls.
Yep.
Yeah, my parents had none. I could watch whatever I wanted. I watched stuff I should never have been watching. They never paid him 1 ounce of attention.
And my siblings and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to figure out the first R-rated movie I saw, and I think it was the Sly Stallone actioner Cliffhanger. Which I want to say was 93, maybe 92. So I was either 6 or 7. And I could never imagine taking my kid to that at 6 or 7, but the 90s were the Wild West in a lot of ways, so
that leads to our second question. What is your favorite movie and why?
The kind of long-standing answer to this has been Jaws. Partly because you start a new job, and you're like, oh, I got the questionnaire, it's always, what's your favorite movie? And, you know, I don't necessarily want to do something that nobody's ever heard of. So I'm like, Jaws to me is like the perfect screenplay. It is the true kind of Joseph Conrad. Wait, that's not correct. Oh, God. Hero of a Thousand Faces. I'm drawing a blank on the author's name. But the book that every 1950s screenwriter got. And it's a true encapsulation of the hero's journey. This man looking out at
William Goldman?
No. Bear with me. I'll look it up really quick. Joseph Campbell, not Conrad.
Okay.
He's oh, God, Heart of Darkness. Joseph Campbell, yeah. And so to me, it's like the perfect summation of the hero's journey. This man who's now contained himself on an island, even though he hates water, has to go back into the water to protect the town that he is now in charge of. And it's like, this is a perfect screenplay. It's 3 perfect leads. And it's just, I mean, Spielberg's use of motion in that movie, his use of framing. I love Jaws. And it's kind of it's the default I've always said, but it's for a reason. I watch it every single year. I watch it pretty much every single year around July 4th. Always at the beach, usually.
There is definitely a reason that it is our number 2 on the list.
Wait, what's number 1?
The Dark Knight.
Oh, yeah, I think I knew that. Yeah. I like
at least for now. So then the third question, and this will round it out for you. What makes a good movie for you?
So I think it falls into 2 categories. It's either something that's going to transport you and really make you feel like you're inside the movie. Let's say a Titanic, which would also be kind of on my short list of favorite movies. That movie kind of transports you into being on that ship. And then there are movies with the exact opposite, which I think are something like There Will Be Blood, which kind of dives you into the psyche of a character and his struggle against the world. And I think Gone Girl is kind of a perfect midpoint of these two, which I think it's kind of what's fun about it. I think that's 2 of the big pillars for me are kind of diving into the psyche of a character or their environment. And then the other is experiencing the world and that experiential aspect that, in some way, a theme park-esque, but not necessarily just a theme park style film. Not a Raiders of the Lost Ark, Titanic, Twister, a film noir, any of those.
Well, thank you for submitting yourself to those questions. You'll be back a few more times this season, so you won't have to go through this again, but you might get to experience some other people have to go through it for the first time.
Good. See them squirm.
Exactly. But let's turn our attention to what we are here for tonight. For our 231st episode, we discussed, as you mentioned, Gone Girl for its 10th anniversary, directed by David Fincher, written by Gillian Flynn, music by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, starring Ben Affleck as Nick Dunne, Rosamund Pike as Amy Elliott Dunne, Neil Patrick Harris as Desi Collins, Tyler Perry as Tanner Bolt, Carrie Coon as Margot Go Dunne, Kim Dickens as Detective Rhonda Boney, Patrick Fugit as Officer James Gilpin, Missy Pyle as Ellen Abbott, Emily Radikowski as Andy Fitzgerald, and Casey Wilson as Noelle Hawthorne. Recognition for this movie, Gone Girl was wide release on October 3rd, 2014. On a budget of roughly $61 million, it would gross roughly $370 million worldwide to finish number 19 at the 2014 global box office. The film received widespread acclaim, was in the top 10 of many major critics for the year, and eventually garnered Rosamund Pike a nomination for Best Actress at the Academy Awards. Gone Girl currently holds an 88% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 79 score on Metacritic, and a 4.1 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So as we start each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
I think I saw it on a rental at about 7 or 8 years ago for the first time. I knew there was a twist in it, was not aware of what it was until I watched the film, and got to have the first time experience, even though it had been out for a few years.
Yeah, I remember watching it with you guys. I can't remember most of the circumstances surrounding it. I think I've only seen it a couple of times. I just most recently watched the film for the 2014 Revisionist Almanac episode that I was on, where I did get a win for Rosamund Pike as Best Actress for 2014 in the Revisionist Oscars. But I think this is maybe only the third or fourth time that I've seen the movie. It's a fun enough film. Like, it was in a really good film year. I wouldn't say that this is maybe even top 5 for David Fincher, at least for me, because I think he's got so many other great films just personally. But I think it's like, if it's not in his top 5, it's probably 6 for the most part. Mom, what do you remember about the movie?
I remember the Rosamund Pike character. I didn't remember all of the plot and the circumstances now until we watched it, over the last few days. But other than that, I really had no relationship with it. We watched it. I remember enjoying the film up to the end, and I couldn't remember the exact ending. So now I got to replay the ending. So for whatever reason, that didn't stick with me. But I just remember watching it with you guys.
Probably because you were not particularly satisfied by it, much as your mother last night groaned when we got to the end of the film.
Yeah, and tonight, actually, after you guys left, we were discussing the film, and she was talking about the fact that it's kind of haunting. She apparently had been thinking about it during the day today, and that's unlike her for a film.
Peterson, what's your relationship to the film?
So I saw this opening weekend, I can tell you the theater, at a Studio Movie Grill just north of my house. I either saw it Saturday night or Sunday night, I can't remember the day, but being a Fincher fan, wanted to see it early. I knew there was twists and turns. I hadn't read the book, but I knew the book a few years earlier was just really heralded as a great read. And I knew it was going to be spoiled quick. So I wanted to get there fast. And my wife and I went on a date night. And yeah, I mean, I've seen it now. Jeez, I think this might be my 5th time. Because I watched it about 6 weeks ago in prep for this, because I knew we were doing it, just so I could get a couple more watches in as I led up to it. And, I think I'd gone about 8 years from initially seeing it. Sorry, 7 years from initially seeing it, probably, or maybe 8. And, I mean, I remembered almost every plot move like the back of my hand. This is one that really imprinted on my brain and, made me feel like the world differently walking out of that first time.
The only thing I will say, every time I come back to the movie that escapes me, like, as far as the beats or the individual details of the plot, those parts I can remember. It's just how dastardly Rosamund Pike is in this movie. I seemingly forget every time how malicious and detailed she is about every single thing.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what makes that heel turn when you find out that the journal is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously not every piece of it is, but so much of it's a lie. And when you first realize, oh, she's playing a real long con here, I think it's so satisfying.
So then what is the film about? Let me ask the married couple here if they have some opinions on it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dana.
No, ladies first.
I think that every married couple goes through a period where they have seen each other enough. They know everything kind of about each other, and there's nothing exciting anymore. And I think that's when you need to rebuild your relationship, or it falls apart. And I think this movie shows that, at the beginning it was all exciting. They were each what the other one had wanted. And then that sort of dies off. They get into their married life, into the everyday humdrum of things, and she gets bored. She apparently had gotten bored before with this long-term boyfriend, the Patrick Neil Harris character. And she gets sinister. She shows her true colors. She had to make up something in order for it to be exciting.
She was a sociopath.
Well, I know that too, but it didn't really come out until that time in their relationship.
Has nothing to do with. I know it has nothing to do with boredom. It has to do with the fact that she was a sociopath and she was vindictive and she kept ratcheting up her crimes involving her sociopathy as she went along. And I had to do some research online, about sociopathic tendencies and such, and found out that that's exactly what sociopaths do. They start out with small indiscretions, and it starts to build, and it starts in the early ages of their 20s and can be up to full-blown sociopathic tendencies when they hit 40. And so she progresses. I'm going to lie about this boyfriend. Then I'm going to accuse this one of rape and make sure his life is ruined. Then I'm going to kill off my husband by pretending to die or being kidnapped and die. And then I'm going to kill the next guy by slitting his throat. So, no, this is, if we're going to talk about this in relation to marriage, is the fact that there is a honeymoon period with marriage, and then you go through these periods where you sit and actually think you've married somebody who's mentally ill. Every couple has those periods, like, oh my God, what is wrong with him or her? Because I don't understand where she's coming from, or that behavior is so strange. Okay, but it passes. Okay,
I'm
not
clipping
if
that.
you're a
That's
sociopath.
going to be blasted all over our socials.
What does it say about me?
I'm just telling you the fact that I think every couple goes through that period of time where they question whether their spouse is completely rational and sane. And it usually is fleeting. But in this particular case, he had every reason to, because she was nuts.
Peterson, care to concur?
In some ways. So I think part of what makes this movie, I think, really interesting is that it begins and it's all about the performative aspects of relationships, and how when you start dating somebody, you're showing them the best sides of yourself. You want to be the most sophisticated, smartest, go to the nicest restaurants, and eventually that wears off, right? Because you can't sustain that. And I think the Amy character is programmed by societal expectations in a lot of ways as a female to behave certain ways, and when she's not receiving that same level of attention kind of brought back to her, that's when she lashes out and becomes more of a sociopath. Obviously, I think she's taking it to the extreme, obviously, because she ends up murdering somebody. But obviously, the Ben Affleck character is also very much at fault here. He's obviously not, I think, evil, but he's just sort of a aloof husband. There's, which will probably appear in my favorite quotes when he's like, "How about Outback tonight?" And it's comical how out of touch he is. But at the same time, I think it's very important this takes place during the recession. They both have lost jobs. He's now failed on his dreams. She's certainly failed on her dreams. And neither of them are living up to probably her Harvard education. I don't know where he went. I don't think they say that. But they obviously had these big, grand schemes for their life, and they let themselves down in a way. And I think that's part of it, too, is they both become these bitter, really kind of hardened shells of themselves. And Amy was probably already that in the first place, because what she did with the Scoot McNairy character, I can't remember his name, and then with obviously Desi initially. But to me, that's what it's about, kind of the performative aspect of yourself, and then how it fades away over time. And you know what? Maybe she doesn't really like Crabby Nick. Maybe she doesn't like Sleepy Nick, or the Nick who wants to eat Chinese food and play video games. So that's part of what it's about, and then it's just about two crazy, fucked up white people.
Then he's also not present because his mind is on this other woman. So he doesn't really care what's going on with his wife. His focus is elsewhere.
What the journal does so well is when we initially hear about the fact that she wanted the baby because that's the version she's telling to the world. She's the one that wanted the baby. And when you get it from his perspective, which I think is probably the true perspective, he says, it would have been great if she was pregnant. Like, which he's also trying to fix a marriage with a baby, which is, inadvisable to say the least. But at the same time, he's thinking, oh, well, this baby's going to fix the marriage, which is what probably word for word she says in that scene where he supposedly pushed her, but didn't actually happen. So, he's certainly not present, and he's off in his own little world. To me, there's so much about in this movie that really speaks to a post-2010 marriage.
So, I obviously am the only one in this conversation that is not married. So I don't know if I can lend to it as much credence as the rest of you. But I will take...
Please enlighten us with your opinion on marriage.
No, I'm going to actually punt. Where I was going with this is that I found what the author was apparently intending by this film. Not only because she wrote the book, she also wrote the screenplay for this. So that's Gillian Flynn. Her idea for this was to kind of gender reverse the normal course of like a murder mystery type of situation. Normally, men are the predators. You're wondering through the first half of the film who really did it, if she's really dead, where did she go? And you're trying to piece these things together. The reason the reveal works so much is that you never suspect the woman that would be in on it, that this is somehow like setting her husband up for her murder. And as such, she wanted to convince the world that women have as violent of fantasies as men.
Some of the research I did for this, are you aware that one of the books she read and really took inspiration from is Dennis Lehane's Mystic River?
Okay.
Which I think is really interesting. I think, that movie, I like that movie. But essentially, she took that as inspiration because I would assume, yes, there is a twist and a murder plot in the middle of that, but that's not really what it's about. Which is kind of what this is about. I mean, this is, as Anne Hathaway said, what's your favorite romantic comedy? And she's like, Gone Girl. This movie's very funny. Like, I was laughing a lot this time. I don't think I was laughing in 2014, but I was laughing a lot now. And I think part of it is just, I think Ben Affleck's perfect casting, just from a lot of, from a meta perspective.
On his fourth or fifth marriage now, or?
Well, and then Emily Ratajkowski is, at the time, perfect casting. Because she is in the Blurred Lines music video, which, as an audience member, if you have any familiarity with that, you're like, oh, that's an interesting person they cast to be the, so that when she does finally take her top off, it's like, well, of course he's an idiot, but you sort of understand it. Like, he's a moron. Like, he's truly, like, that scene's so funny because you're like, what are you doing? Like, what are you possibly thinking?
How do you let her inside the house? Your sister's house, no less?
With her just in the bedroom in the back, and you're in the living room. Yeah, because, nothing bad could happen.
Well, and when she asks, oh, well, how old is she? He's like, she's early 20s, which she's 20. And he's probably, I'd assume, 40, maybe 38 in the movie. So he's twice her age. Yeah, so I think this movie has a lot of moments like that kind of in a Hitchcock way, which is probably the best way I think it's most Hitchcockian, is it has these moments that are so funny and kind of pierce this really brutal tension and makes it, kind of deflates it a little bit. I think it's important.
So, I guess the question remains, is Rosamund Pike the true antagonist of the film, and where does she rank among all-time villains?
I think she doesn't turn into the true villain until she kills Desi. I think the true villain here is societal expectations, particularly put on women. And I think just kind of the construct of marrying somebody and then it not working out, but both of you having kind of too much pride to walk away. And I think that's a big part of the Affleck character is that he won't leave the marriage, which by the end is is insane. But I think he's too proud to walk away. And he doesn't want to be the person who failed on his marriage, even though it has become, I mean, some Emily Bronte version of a marriage.
Well, part of the whole situation is he wouldn't walk away from his marriage. He also wouldn't do anything to fix it. I mean, that would be too difficult. It would be just easier for me to bitch and moan instead of actually doing something. But either way, I have the real antagonist the first half of the film being your own willingness to be prejudiced by what you see as opposed to thinking about what is and is not provable or the truth, which is you believe. Yes, you believe he's guilty most of the time through the first half of the movie.
Do you really? So watching this in 2014, I never once thought for a second he was guilty. Everything about it so staged, and I think it'd be too simple.
Well, the public believed he was guilty, and given that this was a Fincher film, I was expecting the truth. Well, I thought for sure the twist was going to be that ultimately it was going to show that he did do it.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I didn't necessarily think he did it, although there is a lot of creeping doubt the further on it goes. I do think that you're always somewhat from his perspective, and so there is this, especially by the time that he kind of goes out to the shed and realizes that he's kind of been had, and that's about the moment that the reveal is there, and you're like, okay, I guess he didn't do it, but what's really going on? And then they give you that thump upside the head that's, oh, I get it.
Yeah, and I think so early on, he's not acting like somebody to me that would have killed somebody. He's acting like an idiot in some ways. Like he has the smile by the poster, which also you think about his, like, it sounds like his mother raised him to be friendly and kind to everyone. So he heard, oh, smile, okay, and he smiles, and he can't get out of his own way. And I think it would be so much less interesting if he had done it, because I mean the chicken casserole lady's the best. When she takes the selfie with him and he's like, can you delete that? He keeps stepping in mud, and then eventually he kind of understands how to play the media game. He starts getting how he's coming off, and then he starts talking directly to Amy when he realizes she's alive.
I think he acts guilty of something. Not necessarily guilty of her murder, but guilty of something. Maybe not caring about the fact that she's gone. I don't think he really cares that she's out of the picture. I think he'd stopped caring about her. And I think, if anything, he's guilty of that. But which raises doubts that he would do it. But yet he didn't act guilty enough. He kept finding surprises that didn't make sense to him. And it was clear with his facial expressions and his body language that he really didn't know what was going on. So I think that his guilt about his marriage and the guilt about his affair and the guilt that he doesn't really care brought out some of the characteristics as if he had done and made it believable that he could have.
I guess to answer the other question of this, where does she rank in all-time, like, villains? Let's just put her up against female villains of the like. You have the Alex Forrests of the world. I would put that on that level. I don't think it's quite to the level of Annie Wilkes, because that's like an all-time performance by Kathy Bates. But is she better than the Wicked Witch of the West? Absolutely. Is she better than Nurse Ratched? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
she's certainly a villain by the end of it, but I don't think about her like a typical villain. I think there's too much gray area there because, she's transformed into the villain. I think Rosamund Pike is wonderful in the film. I think she's so good.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think she wants to murder. I think she's put in a situation with the Desi character where she's like, oh, maybe I've stepped into a situation with somebody who's worse than my aloof husband, who has imprisoned me at his lake house with cameras everywhere. And that murder in some ways to me is a little bit of a trying to protect herself. She probably shouldn't have called Desi in the first place. The most villainous act to me is maybe the Scoot McNairy character where she essentially stages the rape on him. I think she's in some ways, maybe wrongly, trying to protect herself because I don't think he's not going to let her out of there.
Yeah. I agree with you that she's got to clearly feel trapped by the presence of merely the cameras as he kind of points them out and says, I'm not letting you go. You need to forget what you've had before.
Well, and he keeps saying, do your hair, get some clothes on, start feeling like yourself, which I would say from a normal perspective, from a normal person, which Desi's clearly not, I don't think she would be worried about it. I think she'd say, oh, you know what? I do need to, if I'm somebody who jogs, I need to go jogging and take care of myself. And that's Desi. He's maybe crazier than she is.
Well, her look in the camera with her kind of stare that she had and that wry kind of smile where she clearly evidenced that she was not all there anymore. And I can understand your points regarding Desi, but boy, I think that the fact that she came back and was just lying up a storm to come back, I don't know.
She's still question. Crazy.
Yeah, I no.
About the point where she's taking the wine bottle to herself, I'm like, oh, you're that kind of,
yeah.
Well, and you see her do the thing on her wrist where she's over and over. So she's very calculating, and which is maybe the difference between her and a Crime of Passion is that she is in the long game and really plays Desi for what probably is a couple of weeks,
right?
Until she feels comfortable to kind of kill him. So I mean, as a villain, it's a great character. Where she works with villains, I don't know. I mean, because she's such a great character, but it's not just her villainy that's interesting about her, which I think is important.
Well, Dad, you ready to dig further into this one? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. In Gone Girl, we delve into a real-life mystery that'll have you on the edge of your seat. A charming husband, Ben Affleck, finds himself in hot water when his wife, Rosamund Pike, mysteriously disappears. As the media frenzy grows, secrets surface, revealing a twisted tale of deceit, betrayal, and the ultimate manipulation of truth. This isn't just a whodunit. It's a dark reflection of marriage and the masks we wear.
Thank you. Did you know? Ben Affleck postponed directing Live by Night in order to work on this film with David Fincher, even stating, quote, he's the only director I've met who can do everybody else's job better than they could. On set one day, Affleck changed the lens setting on a camera an almost indiscernible amount, betting a crew member that Fincher wouldn't notice. Affleck lost the bet as Fincher brought up, why does the camera look a little dim? Did you know? The bar, restaurant in the movie opened as a functional bar and restaurant after filming and operated for a few years. It has since permanently closed. Did you know? When it comes to casting roles, David Fincher typically goes on the internet to look through pictures of actors to help him find the right type of actor for a role. When casting the role of Nick Dunne, Fincher spotted photos of Ben Affleck and noticed a particular smile Affleck had on in dozens of photos. According to Fincher, it captured a particular emotion in a scene of Nick Dunne smiling that showed the essence of the character. Soon afterward, Fincher cast Ben Affleck in the role. Did you know? David Fincher's musical brief to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross was based upon a visit he paid to a spa, wherein the music meant to relax him he perceived as creepy and made him feel uncomfortable. This gave him the idea to set the music as though it is passive and relaxing, but actually instills a sense of dread. Did you know? Ben Affleck would constantly sing 80s songs in between takes. Impressed, Tyler Perry decided to start a game that ended up lasting the entire duration of filming. Perry would start to sing the most random song he could think of to see if Affleck would start singing along. According to Perry, Affleck knew all of the words to every single song Perry threw at him, including Broadway show tunes and songs by Barbra Streisand.
Ben and Babs.
Did you know? Rosamund Pike told film critic Peter Travers that whenever David Fincher would catch her on set about to use her cell phone, he'd take a stern-faced selfie and send it to her, causing her to immediately pocket her phone. Psychological torture, anyone? All right, that looks like a good spot for our first break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 232nd episode, we welcome back Peterson and our previous two-time guest, Terry Bartley, to discuss Parasite for its 5th anniversary. Written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, with Han Jin-won, music by Jung Jae-il, starring Song Kang-ho, Lee Sung-hyun, Cho Yo-jong, and Choi Yi-jo, and Choi Wook-cheek. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Do I get extra credit for all those pronunciations? Because I got to do them again next week.
Yep.
I was thinking that while you were saying them.
Oh, it's going to be fun next week when I have an expanded list to read off.
Oh.
But oh well.
The cast is pretty small, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. It gets a little expansive by the time you get to that party at the end.
Yeah.
I guess by the time you get to the party, there's a lot.
It's kind of unusual that my mother didn't want to come on for Parasite. It's one of her favorite movies of all time.
Look, it's always good to take a hit of the bong.
I didn't like the movie.
Parasite.
I have no desire to see it again.
I was kind of neutral on it, to be honest. I'm kind of excited to go back and revisit it because I didn't really have that like crazy excited feeling that everybody else seemingly did on their first watch. Maybe it was colored a little bit by the fact that my mother hated it and was apparently the only person in America who really disliked the movie. But we'll see. Stay tuned for next week.
My brother-in-law was iffy on it. I was trying to explain it to him. He's, why is it so good? It's just a poor eat the rich, right? And I'm like, it's a lot more than that. But
yeah, but those movies are still good. I mean, Saltburn was the same thing, and it's still good.
Yeah, see, I didn't really like Saltburn. I thought Saltburn was kind of silly.
Mm.
Carey Mulligan's very fun, and actually Rosamund Pike's very fun.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest difference is that people who had no interest in the movie didn't go see the movie. We drag Mom along on these, even though she doesn't really ever have any interest in seeing the movie. So, therefore, more visceral reaction.
Yeah. So before we get back into the rest of the episode, Peterson, where are you on the socials and where can people find you? What are you working on?
Yeah, so on the socials, I am at Instagram and Twitter, I believe it. Peterson W. Hill. War starts at midnight. We've got a back catalog. At the moment, we are paused. Just everyone's got kids. Everyone's got crazy lives going on. So we will eventually finish our Wes Anderson, P.T. Anderson miniseries, and then, I mean, every 5 days we tweet other fun miniseries we could do. Some are very serious, and some are very silly.
Cool. And any thoughts on when you might be coming back?
That's a good question. Yeah, we are. I mean, we talk every day, but yeah, I mean, one of us has 3 kids under. I think Jake's are all 4 or under.
Oh wow.
That's a lot of. That's a lot of kids under 4.
Yeah. And also, before we move on, we will move briefly to everyone's favorite segment, Ask Dana Anything. We have no outward submissions, so I turn to our guests. Did you bring any questions for my co-host? Anything that you would like to embarrass him with on the spot?
Yeah, let's keep it in the law realm. Being a lawyer, and my dad was a lawyer, then hated it, and then he opened a financial planning firm. So, but being a lawyer, what do you hate most about being a lawyer?
Judges.
Just
I was going to say other lawyers.
I don't know. Sometimes I guess the worst part is when you know that you don't have something, but you're representing somebody and you just don't have any passion for it or belief in it or whatever, and you have to give it your all and be diligent. It's just really difficult sometimes in doing that, and you do have that obligation. But I guess that's the worst part is just dealing with that.
so let's imagine Nick Dunne rolls up on your doorstep like you're Tanner Bolt. Are you going to
Okay.
take his case?
Of course. It's interesting. I did criminal defense for 17 years, and I used to relish interesting cases. I had a standing order. The public defender's office called, and they offered me a lewd and lascivious case. Automatically take it. Don't even ask. Just take it. Because they were the most bizarre, off-the-wall, laughable cases that you could imagine. And we would take those, and I would have fun with those because they were so bizarre. I mean, I had a guy who decided, hey, well, I'm at a strip club. What difference does it make if I'm here or if I'm in front of my TV at home? I'm just going to enjoy myself. Another one, he's just walking home and walks by a pond near the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. And there are 3 co-eds out there skinny dipping. And so, of course, he just stops, watches, and then starts enjoying himself. And I argued selective prosecution because they charged him with lewd and lascivious behavior, but not the 3 skinny dippers. So that's
I'm assuming
why.
the result here.
Yeah. So anyway, the judge didn't buy it, by the way.
You can't pull up the hammer like Affleck does in this one.
Yeah. So, but still, no, that's I'd say is the most difficult part. And then sometimes, I guess to be perfectly honest, is the stupidity of other lawyers on the other side. You'll find some that are just blazingly stupid, or that are just milking stuff. I always love telling this story, which is they had another lawyer, and he used to love this because he would write these, in a divorce case, he'd write these long 4-page letters telling me how horrible my client was and how great his client was and why everything in the marriage should go in the property division to his client. And so he sends this 4-page letter to me, and I respond, and I said, "Dear Butch, no." And I signed it. And he called and he was just screaming at me, "How could you send me a letter that said no?" And I said, "Easy, because I'm not charging my client for that. And I'm going to send him a letter with the bill showing that I didn't charge him for that. You are going to have to justify the 3 hours you're going to bill for doing that letter. And your client's going to be mad because it had no impact on his case. In fact, made the case worse. So you have to explain. So if you're going to send me that bullshit again, just remember, we're going to get a similar result."
And just to capitalize on this, so let's say somebody were to get gone girled.
Okay.
Would the prenup still be intact? I can't imagine it would.
No, I don't think so. The question I had, and I was going to throw this out, but as long as we're bringing it up, I'm going to bring it up now. I was going to do it the remaining questions. Can you imagine? Obviously, the Neil Patrick Harris character, Desi, was wealthy. She's going to sue his estate for substantial battery. Talking about the money she could potentially reap from the estate for that would have been very large, like millions of dollars, probably. So is that something that made sense? I mean, is that really the potential there that if they actually did a sequel, that's one of the things is they're living on the high horse based on her deceptive murder?
Again, because Tanner even makes mention to it. Where he has a book deal, he has like all these endorsements.
The bar.
Yeah, he franchised the bar. They'll probably end up on a reality TV series by the end of it.
Yeah, he says the Real Housewives of Branson.
Yeah, okay. But still, you could have brought the suit anyway and really
I'm sure they would.
Your case.
But I want to know why they didn't do another investigation. They could have somehow figured out that she was lying and she just murdered him.
That's the one big flaw of the movie, I think, and I think the idea is that the Affleck character doesn't want to push it, and then the Rhonda Boney character is like, yeah, but it's like in Federal's hands. We screwed this thing up so badly that it's now in Federal hands. The feds aren't going to play around with Affleck the way she was. They're not going to have conversations with him. I think that's the kind of hand-wavy part of it. But also, I think this movie exists in a fable land.
So, Any further questions for my co-host?
No, I don't think so. Till next week.
Dana, do you have a favorite dog? Well, it wouldn't hurt their feelings. They wouldn't understand.
I don't know. I don't know if I have necessarily a favorite one. Maggie thinks I am like the world's greatest thing now since she jumps on the bed every morning and I have to give her a belly rub before I get out of bed.
Yes.
Canine manipulator.
I know. I get out of the shower, I come back, and she's laying on my the T-shirt I was wearing overnight. Like, I'm just laying on it because it smells like you, and I'm just trying to manipulate you into giving me more belly rubs.
Anything else, Ma?
No.
All right, so let's move into the rest of our evening. Best performance was where we left off. Dad, who did you have down?
Gillian Flynn, because I thought I guess from what I understand, the book is much more developmental of the characters. They had to take shortcuts for the film itself. But the film itself kept you guessing through most of it. And the plot twists and the bizarre things and everything else. I just thought it was a great story. And I thought for really what I think was her first screenplay, she did a nice job. So I gave her the best performance simply because I think without the screenplay, I don't think anything else in this was that outstanding. I mean, it was solid, but I think the screenplays by far outshined everything else.
I've been waffling back and forth between Rosamund Pike and David Fincher. The screenplay, you took that off my plate. That was on my short list too. I think I'll go with Fincher just because in different hands, this becomes some really cheap version of this that's nowhere near as insightful or as interesting. I think Fincher, he is such a consummate artist that every single piece of his movies have to be perfect, which I think is perfection in some ways. Not all movies. They can kind of overtake the movie, and I think here it's so well done. Because that first half, things are a little bit oddly calibrated, and then you realize, oh, he wants you to feel that. He wants you to feel the weird heightened reality of this. So I mean, I think Fincher is doing a beautiful job directing this film.
I have Rosamund Pike. I just think she is a cool, creepy woman. She does a really good job of the haunted eyes, where she looks like she's actually gone berserk, I guess you could say. And I think that she plays in the beginning, the loving wife, and she's so calculated and it comes across so real that I felt she deserved that.
I thought Rosamund Pike was an obvious choice for this one. I think she is by far the best part of the movie for me. Not only because of the turn or the heel turn in the middle of the movie, but part of it is also the way that she just naturally looks. You can project a lot on her, which is what makes her really quintessential for this role. That Mom was talking about kind of a dead eye thing, and I don't know if I'd go quite that description of it, but there's certainly something with her eyes, her general expression, that it's kind of neutral. And so you can paint on her what you want her to be in any part of the film. If you want her to be the villain, she can be the villain. If you want her to be the doting housewife, she can be the doting housewife. And her ability to kind of slither in between these spaces while not completely occupying one or the other, and yet to me also seem maniacal, ruthless, calculating. I thought she did a fantastic job in this movie.
One of the things that makes the performance so good is while you're watching the movie, she has to feel like somebody that isn't at home in Missouri. And I think her look is perfect for that. She does not look like your normal Missouri person and doesn't carry herself in that way. And then when she's talking in what is basically Benjamin Button voice during the section where she's holed up in the motel, that moment is, she doesn't sound like anybody who's ever been from New Orleans or even stepped foot in New Orleans. And that's such a big component of it for her. So she has to feel otherworldly.
She was my secondary performance. And the best way I can describe the look that happened after she came back and returned home is like a Charles Manson parole hearing. She had the same look as Manson, kind of like, and just creep you out. I mean, if I were Affleck, every night I'd go to bed, I'd see that look on my face and be afraid that all of a sudden I'd wake up and that would be standing over me with a knife.
That's what's so funny. When her first night back, he walks down the hallway, locks the door, and is holding the cat, and he's in the chair. I think that moment is so funny because he's sitting there petting the cat, and he's like, I can't have this door locked. She's going to kill me.
And that's precisely why I would go with David Fincher here as my supporting or secondary, or however we have it. You can definitely tell the aesthetic, the tone of a David Fincher film. He has a signature style that to me is unlike almost anybody else. He borrows some things occasionally, but there's just a different lighting, a different mood, a different attitude that is to every one of his films. And I don't know if it works in every single one. I like some more than others, but it definitely worked for me in this film. So as far as the twist, the setup, the plotting, everybody knows that he is meticulous to the absolute letter, kind of the disciple of Stanley Kubrick in that way. But he makes very good, effective films by doing it this way. So he's clearly got something.
Fincher's an interesting director to me because, for every movie that I think is wonderful or close to a masterpiece, I think he has one that I don't quite get on board with. The Manx, or we'll discuss another one in a few weeks. I think he's such a craftsman, but also his craft can be somewhat cold, which is why I didn't love his movie from last year, The Killer.
Oh, I loved The Killer. I do not care for Fight Club, personally, and I know that will be the one that we're bringing up in a couple of weeks. Looking at you, Scooby-Doo, Mr. Andrew Corns.
Cargo shorts in movie form.
Come
I
get it.
think though he did a good job with the girl with the dragon tattoo. I think that would be in similar style to the one that we're talking about now. It's a similar type book. It's a weird subject matter. The girl is also strange.
I enjoyed that movie because it is the closest interpretation of how I saw the book in my mind. But if you didn't read the book, I don't know if you'd have the same ability to follow that one. Now, maybe that's a part of the script writing, but there's just something that's a little off about that movie.
I'll agree with that. I'm glad I read the book first.
Yeah.
I like that movie just fine, but I don't love it. I don't think it penetrates the material quite like this does.
So, Mom, what is your best secondary?
I sort of think it's a toss-up here between Ben Affleck and the woman who played his sister. I think she did an amazing job of always being there at the right time to say the right thing without a pause, it was Carrie Cook, right?
Carrie Coon, yeah, Carrie Coon.
Coon, sorry, yeah. And Affleck, of course, he's good no matter what he does. But this was the first time I think I'd really seen Carrie Coon do anything, and I thought she did a phenomenal job of role-playing that whole sister thing with how, cry at the drop of a hat with him and was always there for him. And I just enjoyed her performance.
You mean Carrie Coon, who you said, who's Carrie Coon in this last night? I know her from something. And now you're saying that you'd never seen her in anything?
No, I was thinking of the woman who played Wendy in the Mindhunter series.
And
that's
also
not
David
her.
Fincher property.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
I liked that series.
So,
Peterson, who do you have for best secondary?
Yeah, so I'm going to throw some love to Affleck. I think he's really well cast here. I think 50% of the performance is just casting, because we are bringing so much from our own personal relationships with this guy. We know every single time he's risen and fallen, and he's got, truly that smile
Mm-hmm.
and that affability, but also you're like, you also are probably a skis. Like, and that's not to say it's the true Ben Affleck persona, but that's kind of what we attach to him. I think Fincher's playing so wonderfully with that, and like our public perception of him. Because, a lot of people say, oh, Affleck, he's the less smart one between him and Damon. But if you ever talk to anyone, they think Affleck's just unbelievably smart and charming, and kind of blows Damon out of the water in a lot of ways in that regard. I think he also he gets the doofiness. He gets the kind of, this guy's supposed to be smart and charming, but not all the time. Like, he can put on the front, but a lot of times he just wants to sit on the couch and be Nick. And then to go back to kind of the Carrie Coon thing, I wonder, I've always had this thought of, is Affleck wanting essentially to have Amy be like his sister, because he's so close with her, and he wants to have that kind of relationship with her, like essentially that he can be crude with, but she's fun and sexy, and obviously not his sister.
So dare I ask, who is your most charismatic?
I think very easily it's our boy Tyler Perry. I think he walks into this movie. He walks into this movie, and the thermostat just goes up. Every scene with him is so scorchingly hot. He's so good. I love Tyler Perry in this movie. He should have got an Oscar nomination for this role. I think he is so incredibly good as Tanner Bolt. And this is a guy, he's carved out his own little niche doing his movies. And I'm like, God, why can't this happen every couple of years? He's incredible in this movie. He's so good.
Agreed. 100%. Nothing to add, really.
No.
He was my nominee.
So, it's to me.
I guess so.
And I have David Fincher for it because this. I stopped to think about it. Okay, everybody knows that there is a certain style to Hitchcock. So people will call it a Hitchcock film. There are not that many directors that have a unique or distinctive style about them that you can watch a film. Well, think about it. They'll do some different ones periodically, but Fincher has a general style that always has those twists, and there's always a way of filming it that keeps you unsettled so that you're never comfortable until the reveal of whatever aspect it is, even if it's to the last of the movie where what's in the box. And so I just thought it was a very unique style that he has. I don't rate this as one of his better films, but I think it's a very good film, and I think he did a great job. But I give it to him more for just the consistency of his style in general. And so I think that borders or would be the most charismatic, because I think you're almost, if you're a fan, going to go to the theater for him as much as for what the movie is.
Let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees, and we can add more when I open it up to the floor. But I have the meet cute, so this is the description, kind of her reading the journal generally, and then us getting kind of the flashback to their relationship and such. I have the twist, which is the first time that you see, I'm really happy that I'm now dead. Meeting with Tommy, which is kind of been alluded to at least once. That's the Scoot McNairy character, when I think it's like really cemented that she is maniacal and just truly evil and psychopathic, personally. But then we have the Desi situation, which I think could be extrapolated over multiple scenes, or you could take any one of them in particular. But I guess if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it's the final moments with him where she actually kills him. And then finally reconciliation, which again is kind of like a montage of things near the end, but it's kind of the ending to the film. So out of these, what did I miss?
I mean, I'll say any scene with Tyler Perry is close to making my list. But I think the big one is the reveal of the woodshed, and then as it goes directly into the cool girl monologue. And I believe, that moment is a fade to black, just like we get so many other times. But what's different is now it's a fade to black, and we're getting her true thoughts.
Anybody else?
Included in that reconciliation, do you have the final scene, Tom, where they're still back together and it emulates the first scene?
What do you mean emulates the first scene?
Well, the first scene, when the movie opens, he's still laying in bed with her and he's stroking her hair and talks about how he wishes he could crack open her skull. And then at the end, he does like the same thing.
He does?
Yes.
The opening scene he's talking, and in the closing scene, she's talking. Because that's when she says, "What have we done to each other?"
I don't know. I thought the opening scene was kind of like a dreamlike quality. It was in soft white lighting around the edges. And the final scene to me is him narrating kind of this partners in crime thing. It's like 30 seconds after that. So I'm not sure where that necessarily came in unless I missed something. Well, either way. Okay, so out of these, what is the best scene?
I think the final moments with Desi.
The twist. To me, that scene basically shifts the entire movie, and it does it on kind of a dime. It's like all of a sudden it goes from, wondering what's going on and who did it and did he really do it, to then going, oh, she's a sociopath, I think. And then they start revealing just the level of her pre-planning, her mindset, what she went through in order to get to that point. And you start going, boy, is this not the person I thought we were dealing with through the first half of the film. And so to me, that's the best scene because it unmasks the first half of the film.
I think it has to be one of those two. Either you're getting the climax or you're getting where the film changes complete tones. I think you could say to a degree that even after the Desi scene that the film kind of flips into a new direction again. But because of that, it's kind of feels like it's waning action. So it's one of those two. I personally would go with the Desi scene, but I could be convinced of either.
Personally, I'm going to go with the twist, but I'm also going to say the few minutes where he's running to the woodshed and it pulls those two halves of the movie together. I love that. 6 minutes, roughly?
As far as favorite scene, I have the meeting with Tommy. I mean, it is one of the hardest scenes to probably sit through to see how she set this previous guy up. But at the same time, it's like revealing all of these little characteristics. He's not the first guy. She's done this before, and she's now doing it on an even more diabolical level. She's ruined one guy's life, and she may get another guy killed. And to me, that's just kind of like a cementing of exactly who this character needs to be now that we've changed the progression of the film.
I think it's when she comes back in the car and steps out of the car with her, dripping with blood and he's in shock and she walks up to him and just drapes herself over him. And you can hardly believe she came back and like that.
For me, it's the Desi scene. Talking about the quintessential come and go.
Wow, Dad.
If you had any questions about her sanity and her level of manipulation and sociopathy, while she's having sex, she reaches up with a box cutter, slits his throat, and then lays there and lets the blood run all over her and doesn't bat an eye.
Well, it's all part of the theatrics of what she's creating.
I understand.
Yeah.
But again, wow, who in their right mind could do that? Yeah, so if you had any question about it, that's where it's resolved. Because you just go, this woman is batshit crazy.
Now, to be fair, her hair was not ruffled, a point that someone else, not naming names, pointed out while watching the film. And whether or not she could be labeled a psychopath by association. Just saying.
Yeah, I don't know who it was, but I mean, her hair isn't even ruffled. And I said, you're ignoring the slitting of the guy's throat and the blood running all over her? That part you don't care about?
You can go through with the whole murder and she's covered from her neck down in blood and she does her hair and her makeup were just perfect. It seemed unrealistic.
She knew she was going to be on TV later, so...
Okay.
Since y'all have already said the Desi scene, I'll say I do want to throw a shout out to the Shannon Shebert.
Okay.
Is it Shebert? I think it's Shebert. Shannon Shebert scene where Affleck is having to kind of win over not just the American public, but also win over Amy because he knows she's alive. And I just think that scene is so well handled. Affleck's really good in that scene. Celia Ward, who plays Sharon Shebert, she's really good. And oh my God, I'll wait for quotes. There's a quote I love in the scene.
As far as the most indelible moment, I have it being the rather obvious choice where someone's blood is just gushing out of their neck as they're orgasming. I have the Desi scene.
Our first of two flaccid penises in this movie. Neil Patrick Harris which is also my indelible moment, is the slitting of Desi's throat. It's the way that Fincher perfectly stages it. So she is perfect from the head up, and her bottom 80% is just drenched in blood. So when she finally gets to the house, she's just caked in dried blood. I mean, It's just the perfect fable of this movie is how she looks.
Apparently, I was watching this movie all wrong. We have somebody that's focused on somebody's hairdo, and we have another person who's focused on flaccid peni. I don't think I got either of those things out of this movie.
Yeah, Affleck too in the shower.
You know, I know what you were referring to, but that was not what I was watching that scene for.
He is truly vulnerable with her in that moment.
Yeah,
True.
Well, I often say that there are certain women that just are naturally emasculating. And at the moment she walks back in drenched in blood like that, that's her. I mean, at that point in time, I think I would have a very difficult time being aroused by her ever again. For fear that I could end up with a knife stuck in my back or who knows what.
Other indelible moments.
I had the reconciliation simply because it is so bizarre. I mean, every aspect, she had it all planned out. And she did it on the drop of a hat, and how she's manipulating the FBI into not looking into what's going on with the diary and everything else. And yeah, to me, that's just my most indelible moment, is just the level of manipulation and the Charlie Manson parole hearing stare just creeped me out.
I also had the Desi scene with the blood squirting out, and where you just realize that she is absolutely, yeah, like Dad said, batshit crazy. I mean, how can you not have any remorse? You just killed somebody and then drape yourself over somebody else with all this dried blood, and it just was the culmination of her strange behavior.
All right, well, that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, as of this last month, all of our episodes are also now in video format. That's right, you can see my resting nerd face and all of Dana's famous okays in pristine high definition. So far, we have 15 different episodes now available to watch. Just head to youtube.com/Gmote podcast, where I have the full video and audio feeds on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmote podcast. Both of these are in the episode description of this episode, so check us out there. And if you do, please like the video or subscribe to us. We would really appreciate it. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Freddie Salem, 70, American guitarist from the Outlaws. Roger Palm, 75, Swedish drummer for ABBA. Catherine Crosby, 90, American actress. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Anatomy of a Murder, Operation Madball. Was the widow of Bing Crosby, by the way. Barbara Lee Hunt, 88, English actress. Frenzy, Paper Mask, A Merry War, Vanity Fair. Drake Haugeston, 70, American actor, was in The Days of Our Lives. John Ashton, 76, American actor. Beverly Hills Cop, Breaking Away, She's Having a Baby, Gone Baby Gone. Chris Christopherson, 88, American singer-songwriter, as well as an actor, was in A Star Was Born, 1976 version, and Blade. Author of such number one country hits as For the Good Times, which was a Ray Price song, Sunday Morning Coming Down from Johnny Cash, Help Me Make It Through the Night, and his song Me and Bobby McGee became a posthumous number one hit for his former paramour, Janis Joplin, in 1971. And lastly, Maggie Smith, 89, English actress. The Harry Potter films, Sister Act, and Downton Abbey.
So several of these people that we know have popped up in the course of our discussions, you had mentioned that obviously Catherine Crosby was in Anatomy of a Murder, which just came out, an episode of ours 2 weeks ago. Barbara Lee Hunt, one of the, I think, second or third to last Hitchcock femme fatale or lead actress.
The last. Frenzy was his last film.
Okay. And obviously, I know that Maggie Smith has special importance for Mom here, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think John Ashton has to clearly have singular importance for my parents for the film She's Having a Baby. Now, why might that be?
Do you remember? It was our first fight. It was a John Hughes film, and I historically do not like John Hughes because he makes fun of things that I hold dear, or parenting, marriage,
You're just way too
all this
serious.
stuff. And I said I hated the film, and you started sobbing. Oh, I liked it. We weren't compatible because we didn't like the same film. And I'm like, okay, we didn't like the same film? Wow, okay. I hope.
You were arguing with me about it. Telling me how wrong I was.
Well, that sounds like him.
They're
It must not have turned out too badly.
almost 37 years later. Yeah.
And, of course, yours truly.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
With all good things come blemishes.
But, Mom, I told you I would clear out a little bit of space here for you to go iso ball on us with Maggie Smith. Why did she have singular importance to you?
I think she was so snarky and that it came off so personal, I guess you could say, in everything that she did, whether it was, Sister Act, or whether she was playing in the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, or what was another one I saw her in outside of Downton Abbey. It's another one she played with Judi Dench. But every character that she had, she could give a speech that made so much sense to the person that she was giving it to, and that could turn around whatever situation they were in. And then at the end, jab in that little bit of snark that made the whole scenario so very funny. And she was so good at it without trying. It seemed seemingly effortless for her. I think the world lost quite a charming woman.
It's only because she reminds you of your grandma.
Okay. And maybe I, in some way, wish to become that snarky old woman.
Mission accomplished.
Oh, thanks.
She won 2 Academy Awards, and then had a second phase of her career where she was in Steven Spielberg's Hook. And then, in that movie, she's aged up from what I would say, she's probably 58, 60 in that movie. And she's playing like 95, 100. I mean, she's playing so old in that movie, and it's really touching, those first couple scenes with her and Robin Williams. And then obviously she had the Harry Potter films, which, my kids, I told them she passed, and they were like, oh, her Professor McGonagall's really beloved.
And so we commemorate these here with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Let's move to best, funniest lines. Margot Dunne. Everyone knows that complicated is a code word for bitch.
Tanner Bolt. He shouldn't smile at the makeup artist.
Amy Dunne. I've killed for you. Who else can say that?
Amy Dunne. We're so cute, I want to punch us in the face.
Amy. I'm the cunt you married. The only time you liked yourself was when you were trying to be someone this cunt might like. I'm not a quitter. I'm that cunt. I killed for you. Who else can say that? You think you'd be happy with a nice Midwestern girl? No way, baby. I'm it. Nick. Fuck. You're delusional. I mean, you're insane. Why would you even want this? Yes, I loved you, and then all we did was resent each other, try to control each other. We caused each other pain. That's marriage.
Desi Collins. Octopus and Scrabble?
Yeah. Amy Dunne. Nick Dunne took my pride and my dignity and my hope and my money. He took and took from me until I no longer existed. That's murder.
Amy Dunne. The girl with the giant come-on-me tits?
Nick Dunne. When I think of my wife, I always think of the back of her head. I picture cracking her lovely skull, unspooling her brain, trying to get answers. The primal questions of a marriage. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other? What will we do?
Nick Dunne. We should go to Outback tonight.
Margot Dunne. Whoever took her is bound to bring her back.
Tanner Bolt. I will drill you as if you were doing a deposition. What to say, what not to say. Margot. A trained monkey? Tanner. A monkey who doesn't get the lethal injection.
Amy. Want to test your marriage for weak spots? Add 1 recession, subtract 2 jobs. It's surprisingly effective.
Margot Dunne. Boo-hoo, I got laid off. Guess I'll fuck a teenager.
I'm out.
Amy Dunne. For Valentine's Day, I thought I'd buy a gun.
I'm conducting an investigation, not a witch hunt. And 2, don't ever talk to me that way, ever. My last one is Tanner Bolt. I swear, you two are the most fucked up people I've ever known, and I specialize in fucked up.
That was great.
All right, let's move to the Stanley rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measurement of roughly after the initial 5 years, so that would have been roughly 2014 to 2019 or so. So we're living in 2019 to now. But during that period, how has this movie been perceived? How has it been received yet by the audience as well as the industry at large? Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
All right. I think that this movie in some ways is kind of a little bit forgotten. While there are certainly Fincher films that stand out and are a little bit more nuanced or that are more popular, Seven obviously has come up, Fight Club has come up. There are a couple of other ones that The Social Network might be among that list as well.
Benjamin
I think
Button.
that this one is kind of a B Fincher film on the list. It's not among his most popular. It's not the ones that you think of necessarily first. I still, unless you're a cinemaphile, or cinephile is actually the term, we keep mishandling that label. Unless you're a cinephile, you probably don't know David Fincher's name overall in the same way that the rest of us do. I guess as podcasters, we just take it for granted that people know these people. But on the same standpoint, this is a Ben Affleck vehicle in kind of the Ben Affleck renaissance, right around the time that he had just won Best Picture for Argo, or not too very long after, and about the point where he was going to be Batman. So, like, this was his high point, other than maybe in the late 90s when he was in Armageddon. So, with that, I do think that this has some legacy, but it's tapered off. It's definitely waned even within the 10 years since it came out. I think it has some name ID, but the amount of people that might have seen this film is maybe not as high as some other films that from that particular year. Whiplash comes to mind. The Grand Budapest Hotel comes to mind. I think those are much more well-seen films from that particular year, much more talked about. Boyhood, I think, was a much more widely seen film for how much it was in the conversation for Best Picture that year. This one still kind of flew a little bit under the radar. So from I guess on my own personal rubric standpoint, it's not going to necessarily be taught in film school by anybody. It's maybe got some good critics and directors that kind of think well of this film or hold it in a little bit higher esteem. So for me, that's about a 2 on the industry side of things. For an audience side, I think most of the film nerd community has probably seen this. It's maybe extrapolated a little bit further into the general public. So I would put that at about a 3.5. I have a 5.5.
Yeah. Well, from an industry standpoint, I don't think it had a whole lot of impact. It didn't advance anybody's careers past the initial. I think Fincher was at his high point or before that, coming off The Social Network, which may or maybe should have won the Academy for Best Picture that year. I mean, it didn't give any bounce to Rosamund Pike, even though she was nominated. She really didn't do a whole lot for a while after that. Ben Affleck seems to just be like a cat, and he has 9 lives. He'll self-implode, and then he'll come back, and he'll be good, and then he'll implode again, and yeah. While anyone would want to ride that roller coaster, I'm not sure, but I had a 2 also for the industry. And as far as the public, I think that there have been a lot of people who've seen it, and there's a lot of name recognition, and it is a memorable thing for a lot of people, even though they don't think of it. When you mention the film, they've been there. I went with the public for a 3.5 for a 5.5 also.
Hence the giggling to start out with.
Yeah. We never talk about this per se before we do it.
No, and we seem to always fall within 1 point of each other on almost every category. There's been very few films where we've disagreed vehemently. Peterson, why don't you take the next shot at this?
Yeah, so I think I'm definitely higher on this movie than you guys in the sense of its legacy. I think this movie is a perfect example of how David Fincher essentially created a house style for Netflix. Obviously, House of Cards was the year before, but he uses his digital aesthetic in this, and I think every Netflix crappy TV show is trying to emulate this in some way. Obviously, nowhere nearly as competently, because Fincher, as you alluded to with Affleck changing the focal point of the camera, in Fincher's being, what happened? He's got such a keen eye, and so I think industry, and obviously Rosamund Pike gets an Oscar nomination. I do think she rode some of the wave for this movie. The thing that I think hurts her, though, is that she is essentially typecast now as the icy girl, which she's so good in this movie. That's what people thought of her as. I mean, they forgot about the fact that she's like light and airy and wonderful in something like Pride and Prejudice a decade earlier. And so I think industry, I'm going to go 4 for the legacy. And because I do think that people do look at this film in the industry and think how expertly it's made. And then from the public perception, I think this movie will live on forever because it is one of those airport thrillers that's done to such a high caliber. I'm going to go 4 for the general public as well.
So you have an 8?
Yeah, sorry. So I've got a total of 8. Yep.
All right, Ma.
All right. Well, talking about the movie industry is not one of my strengths, so I only give it the popular or the personal accountability for how people view this.
Yes, our number 1 guest who just likes to play by her own rules.
Well, I know what I'm not good at. So as far as legacy, I enjoyed this film. I would watch it again. The ending is weird. Not exactly what you expect, but I think it's definitely one that you could see, and the fact that she is so incredible in this film. I gave it a 5.
So is that 5 total?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't do the 2 separations.
Okay, so all right.
It ends up as a 6 average between the 4 of us.
Okay.
All right. So then impact and significance. Dad, go ahead.
I think it had a significant amount of impact within the parameters. I think Fincher got to, within the first 5 years, it just furthered his career, and it gave him opportunities to do a lot of other things. He did a lot of other directing. I think he did Mindhunter after this and such. So at least within that 5 years, I think it didn't advance him, but it certainly made him a more bankable entity for producers. So I went with a 3.5 for the industry overall. And really, I'm going to give it a 4 for the public for this reason. It was 17th in box office.
Domestic, not global.
Yes. If you look at the domestic box office, it was one of the few films that finished that high that was not animated or a superhero comic book film. That meant that there was a lot of people that were going to see this film who do not go to other films often.
So there were only a couple of ones that are not based on some form of IP or animation. As you mentioned, Interstellar was the top finisher among all of those at number 11.
Nolan's IP himself now.
Well, I understand.
Yeah.
But even so, it's still original storytelling.
Oh, 100%.
American Sniper, and then you get... Is Lucy like... that was the Scarlett Johansson action film, right?
Yeah, I remember reviewing that movie. It's a train wreck. I really didn't like that movie.
Well, that finishes one place ahead of Gone Girl. Otherwise, it's this one. So this would be in the number 4 in original programming from that particular year. Otherwise, you've got your Guardians of the Galaxy, the Transformers, Hunger Games, X-Men, etc., all during that year.
And that's my point, is for the public, this connected with a broader audience. And just because it didn't finish in the top echelons, some of those films, the box office levels on them are because people were seeing them 2 and 3 times because of the nature of the films and who it was going to see them. This is going to connect to a more mature audience, and it did very well, and it spoke to a larger, broader form of America. So I gave it a 4, so I'm at a 7.5 overall.
While I just generally disagree about your point with David Fincher, in fact, he has not made anything that is specifically for Netflix where he has carte blanche to do whatever the hell he wants. It was, for a while, thought of that he would not return to movies, except that he got his number 1 passion project in Mank off the ground, which was a script that his dad wrote. Otherwise, there were people that thought he was so fed up with Hollywood, that's why he went to TV. This is not something where he became bankable. Mank was a passion project he made for himself that they put on Netflix, and it flopped. The Killer, equally so. That was something that came and went, and for most people, unless, again, you're a cinephile, is not like something you're flocking to because David Fincher directed it. Again, most people don't know who he is. If you said the director of The Social Network, that might get some attention. But if you just said David Fincher, I don't think it has the same name recognition as Christopher Nolan, obviously, but even to lesser degree, certain directors that are in that mid-tier, like Michael Bay has more name recognition than David Fincher, which is an absolute crime.
Yeah, but I think that's the house style of Michael Bay, is Transformers movies make a lot of money. I mean, The Rock, there's a lot of those movies that just make money. Fincher really is kind of a marquee name. When I hear Fincher, I get excited, but, my siblings who don't care about movies, they're like, hey, was that the new Fincher? Because they care about Seven. They liked this movie. My sister, wildly, I told her I was watching it, and she's like, oh, I've never watched that. And I was like, you're insane, because she loves this kind of thing. She loves watching the dark, twisted documentaries about people being murdered, and then, all those on Netflix. And this is just like the peak and pinnacle of that art form, of taking that kind of story and our obsession with it, our true obsession, because it is turning an eye on us too, as the audience, and it just perfects it, I think.
So ultimately, I'll make this very short. I came down to the exact same scores you did at a 7.5. Even broken down between the two categories. So 2 7.5 so far out the gate. Let's go to Mom. What do you have as your broken rules score on this one?
I have to be honest, as an average moviegoer, I didn't realize all of the films that David Finch had made until I started doing some research for this podcast. And I had seen quite a few of his other pieces. I do like this one almost as much as the Mindhunter series. I think that was really good. And I think that this isn't a new theme. And a lot of the shooting of the film and so on, we talked about Hitchcock, that's not new either. It's just kind of brought back and reused the angles and so on and so forth. So I didn't give it the highest score. I gave it a 6.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to be getting the high one on this. Because I do think, from a legacy perspective, in that first initial 5 years, the Finch man just builds this really interesting ability to look at these projects. And, he was attached to so many different things after this. The problem with Fincher is he's a perfectionist. And he's not just going to settle on an okay script. He wants it to be perfect. And I think I commend him there. If David Fincher wanted to turn around and make World War Z 2, which he almost made, and he would take a studio cash grab, they'd hire him tomorrow. But he wants 100% total control. I mean, that's why when they approached him about making Star Wars Episode 7, he said, "Do I get control?" They said no. So I think he's so respected. I think from a industry standpoint, the first 5 years especially, I'm going to give him a 4.5 because Mindhunter, I think, does not happen without this. He does get Mank, but Mank's its own weird little twisted thing. And then from a public perspective, I think, this thing was all the buzz. As you said, number 17 at the box office, and one of the only true 4 adult movies. American Sniper, that's an adult movie, but everything else is IP driven. I guess Interstellar's for adults, but you could take a kid to that. You could take a 12-year-old to that. They might be incredibly confused, but they would go. They're probably entertained. But essentially it's this and American Sniper, the adult films. So I think easy 4 for me for the general public in that first 5 years. So an 8.5 total for me.
So great round number here, 7.38. Gotta love the math. Let's move to novelty. This is a category that I have recently started splitting between both the originality of the idea as well as the execution, kind of 5 and 5 like we have for our past 2 categories here. Let's start with, do you want to take a shot at it, Peterson?
Sure. I think novelty, I think it kind of perfects what a Hitchcockian thriller can be in today's terms. And I don't mean that to say this feels like a Hitchcock movie, because it doesn't. I think it's taking our same fascination, kind of like watching Psycho. You're in some way rooting for Norman Bates as the car is going down and it stops, and you're like, wait, the car's got to go down or it's going to get caught. There's no movie. I think he's playing with that a little bit here. When she's initially gone girling him and you realize, oh, she's out living her own little life. I think it's, you kind of want her to get away with it. You're like, yeah, Nick's kind of a aloof husband. Maybe he doesn't deserve to be fully gone girl, but it's the idea that we're in the mind of the protagonist and in the shoes of the protagonist of that scene. Not of the movie, but of that scene. And we start kind of having that feeling of, okay, maybe she will get away with it. Maybe I want her to in some way. And then I think from a novelty perspective, we are also in a world that is clearly kind of ramping up to the moment we're in now, where social media is abuzz and truth in journalism is Oh, who cares? If it's going to sell, then let's just say it. So I think Novelty, I'm going to kind of stick with an 8.
The novelty of this, as far as original concept, I think is really quite good. And I can't think of too many other films where it's this big of a plot twist, which Peterson, ironically, the only other one I could come up with was Psycho, where the film just changes abruptly and you have no idea of where. But even then, it wasn't halfway through the film. It was more towards the first third. So I'm giving it a 4.5 for originality. The subject matter is the only mark down for originality I would have, simply because it has a feel for reality TV, which is why I think they played into the Nancy Grace tie-in so much. As far as execution, I think it was done very well for what it was and implementation of the screenplay itself. So I went with a 4.5 for that, also for a 9 overall.
I have this rated at a 7. The reason being is I don't think whacked out women over men is a new or original theme. You had the same thing in the all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank, where the character goes after the married man and she's obsessed with him.
Promising Young Woman?
Yep.
No. She's thinking of
No.
Alex DeForest in the late 80s.
Fatal Attraction?
Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction.
Yeah.
Fatal Attraction, right. So I don't think that that is novel. I think, however, we see the mental illness in a completely different light. We don't often see how it really affects people and that they have no control over it. So I did like that aspect of it, but I guess it's maybe because of what we do. So I did think that it brought some mental illness to the front of the public. The fact that she didn't really get murdered and the fact that she was faking her own disappearance, that wasn't necessarily new either. So I just went with the 7 overall because I think that some of the themes are reused just in a new way.
It would be fun to watch this in a double feature with Gaslight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a 4 on the originality of the idea. I do think the fact that we've kind of reversed the gender roles, the gender politics in this one, makes the, as I said earlier, the twist more exciting and kind of unanticipated. So it is playing with some of the societal norms to get to that point. But do I also think this is the most original film, even in David Fincher's library or oeuvre? No. And I do think he is borrowing a little bit from himself. He has a certain style and aesthetic. So I don't think this looks all that different or is covering too different of a subject material from stuff that he likes. He thinks everybody is a psychopath. So to be able to create a movie that is literally about a psychopath is like just dessert for him. But on the execution side of things, while his movies are meticulously well made, there are some things to me that, are a little bit cute or lacking. There are a few things here where I'm like, this is a really well executed movie, but is it like peak execution? It's not quite there in the way that I would say, to a degree, The Social Network is operating at a slightly higher level from all of its component parts. So I also have that at a 4. I have an 8, and that is an 8 average between the 4 of us. Let's move to classicness. Dad, you usually lead off this category.
All right. Well, I start always at a 7 and go up or down. Okay. And from a standpoint of the psychological aspect of this and the presentation of a sociopath, I'd give it points up. I have to give it points down simply because I read some of the commentary that were issued by various women critics who pointed out that this has a tendency to depreciate allegations of domestic abuse, because now there's an actual, argument to be made that a lot of this is being made up by manipulative women. So I have to give it points back for that. So I'm coming right back where I started at a 7.
I am also at a fence-sitting 7. There is no timelessness factor yet for this one, as far as I'm concerned. There are no issues where I feel it's ahead of its time, but I also don't really have anything that's aged poorly, per se, to detract from the film. So I just end at my origin point as well. I have a 7.
I'm going to go slightly up to a 7.5, because I think this will be a movie, just being a David Fincher movie, being in his canon, that people will, cinephiles forever, we're going to watch. And then I just think it's kind of, to me, one of the peaks of this modern genre. So I think 7.5 is kind of where I nestle kind of comfortably.
All right, Mom, I need a 6.5 for some good math.
Well, I'm going to ruin it for you because I have an 8. Because the subject matter doesn't change. That is timeless. There is nothing that ruins it for any generation now, or do I think in the future, because it's just simply about people. So I have 8.
So that is yet again our great round number of 7.38. Mom, rewatchability. Let's start with you.
8. I have an 8 for this. I could sit down and watch this film and get something new out of it every single time. I think I should have probably watched it before we had to watch it for this show, because I'd heard about it. I saw it the one time. It comes across every once in a while on Netflix, and there's nothing wrong with it as far as that goes, other than my mother's statement that it can be kind of haunting. It leaves you with something to think about later. So, but I did enjoy it, and I would definitely see it again. I have an 8.
I think, I'm going to go down to a 9.5 on this, because
That's down?
Sorry, go up to a 9.5 on this. It is, to me, any point in this movie, I'm sucked. I mean, if it comes on, I'm sucked in. And I think a couple months ago when I watched it, I just immediately was like, this is just, it's like catnip. It's so fun. It's pulpy. You can take it as seriously as you want to, which I think is really important. You can just sit down and be like, let's have fun with this and just enjoy it for being a thriller. Or you can really sit back and look at it and have fun and really dissect it from a kind of social politics perspective, gender politics perspective. So I think, to me, 9.5, I mean, I love this thing. It's so pulpy and fun.
It's a film that I will watch again, and I may put on, especially for somebody who's never seen it, and watch their reaction. Am I going to sit and watch it just for the heck of it? The twists don't mean as much once you've seen it, to me. And the thrill of seeing it fresh and not knowing what's going to happen is the enticement of this movie. So rewatching it doesn't have the same impact for me. So I went with a 6.5, which is meaning it's on my list of things I'll rewatch, and I'll sit and watch it again if it's on. But it's just not going to be on a regular cycle of things I'm going to watch.
I kind of agree with you that this is a movie that I might return to every few years, but it's not something that I'm probably going to watch once every year. And to be quite honest, that's probably most David Fincher films for me. While I enjoy them when I do actually sit down and watch them, there's nothing that really draws me in to rewatch them repeatedly in the same way. Partially because I just don't necessarily share the same headspace for psychopaths that he seems to. He thinks everybody is perverted and dark and twisted, and I just don't want to necessarily live in that world. I can respect his opinion. I don't necessarily agree with it. I know that there are a lot of dark, twisted, and perverted people. You just have to basically go on any place on the internet and you could find that. But do I want to live in that headspace? So that for me probably comes down to about a 3. And then if it's on somewhere, like I'm flipping through stations, it's on one of the streaming services or something to that effect, I'll probably put on a few scenes, but it's not something that I'm going to sit all the way through. It's 2.5 hours. And it does have some twists and turns, but it's enjoyable in a few spots. It's not stop my day and watch this movie level quality, at least for me. So I have a 6. So that gives us a 7.5 average between the 4 of us. For audience score on this one, we had an 87% for Google users and a 79% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.3. So to repeat the categories, we had a 6 for Legacy, a 7.38 for Impact and Significance, an 8 for Novelty, a 7.38 for Classicness, a 7.5 for Rewatchability, and an 8.3 for audience score, giving us a final total of 44.56, and currently placing it on our list. 1 spot ahead of Gentleman's Agreement by 0.01 points, and just behind Rope at 133.
I love Rope.
It's a fantastic film.
Rope's got to be the 60s, isn't it?
Nope,
No, 1948.
Is it really 1948?
Mm-hmm. It's just really well made.
Yeah.
If you didn't like any of our scoring, you can write us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com or at any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, GMOAT, on any of our social media feeds. That would be Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also find us at our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast, and that's Ronnie with a Y, not an IE. Let's move to remaining questions on this one. I only have 2 in a segment that has grown ever longer over the last few weeks as I've tried to ask a lot of remaining questions. But I really don't have a ton for this movie, despite the fact of where it ends. So we kind of already answered one already with the female villains rankings. But the other one, would you have stayed with Amy Dunne at the end of the film?
Go ahead, Dan. I see you're itching for it.
This is the joke I had, but I don't know if I should use it.
Well, let me predict it for you. You're already living this scenario.
Honest to God, every time I go to the doctor, the only time they ever ask is, do you feel safe in your home? And she's sitting there with me. It's only when she's with me that they ask that question. Honest to God. And I always lean over to the nurse and go, I can't. She's here right now. All right. Anyway, but that was the joke. So I apologized before we started that I was going to potentially make that joke, but I didn't make it. He did.
And remember, the control of this episode is in my hands.
Well, I don't know. I mean, think about this. This is my remaining question. Okay? He obviously can't have sex with her, and he obviously can't have sex with somebody else. So what's he going to do? So my guess is he's going to be trying to think some way out of this mess.
Hey, don't knock masturbation. It's sex with somebody I really love.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
I can't believe you
Okay.
said
I'm quoting a film. Come on.
I know. It's Woody Allen.
Annie Hall, yeah.
I don't know. I don't have any other remaining questions other than that. I mean, I guess I do have one remaining question. Since sociopaths go down a path...
We didn't ask... Just a second. We did not ask Peterson whether he would have stayed with her.
Well, would you have stayed with her, Mom?
Hell no. I would have found some way out of that mess. Even if I had to, like, pay her off to go away.
I don't think there's any way you stay with her. I mean, now, granted, this is in a much different world that is in its own little version of ours where she's not found out. I mean, but I feel like she'd have to get found out. I mean, my word would be the kid. I mean, that is the only possible argument for staying. But no. Yeah. But do you do it to save the kid? I don't know.
Well, and what it
you wouldn't
does
want
is
the psychopath raising the child.
No, so you gotta, like, can you get the child from her? And I don't mean, because if it was the opposite, if it was a woman who was going to take the kid away from, it'd be easy. But the man's, it's hard for a man to get custody.
Okay, but what it does is it shields how many marriages that stay together where there's abuse, drug addiction, etc., and you stay together for the kids. This just ramps it up one step higher, which that was the point of why they made that, is you're staying together for the kids, where most other people are going, why in the world would they stay together?
I think more it's in this very, very specific circumstance. Would you want the kid to be influenced by her 6 to 7 days a week?
Okay, but you're going to have a difficult time. I can tell you that as a lawyer, you're going to have a very difficult time prying the child away.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So you'd have to establish that she was not fit, and that would mean establishing that she's a sociopath. Good luck. You already know how well she is planning.
Any other remaining questions yet?
I do have one, which is there any way that they don't investigate what happens at Desi's house and basically let her off? I mean, I think there's so much evidence there that, I mean, everything about that circumstance tells me they're going to investigate it and find her out, essentially. Or at least know something's wrong.
How do you not have any cameras trained to the inside of the house, where it would have recorded her just walking around regularly?
It was all entrances and exits, it looks like.
Who has internal video? I've never seen or heard of anybody having internal video.
Unless
Like
you're a
that.
store or, retail that you're worried about theft.
Or some sort of deviant who
Well,
really is like
Okay.
caught up on your own voyeurism of yourself and your family.
Yeah, that would just be weird.
Well, I do want to thank our guest for being with us this week. You will be back next week, Peterson, but remind everybody where you are and what you're working on.
Yeah, so you can find me at Peterson W. Hill at Twitter and Instagram, and then on and off working with War Sharks Midnight, trying to complete some episodes there, and then occasionally you can find me at psychodrivein.com, where I write film criticism for them.
Excellent. And like I said, you will be back next week, but for anybody that wants to find you, your links will be available both on the website and in the show notes. But, Mom, you won't be back with us until much later this year when it comes to being on the show. I think your next appearance is Roman Holiday, which we'll be revisiting towards the end of the year.
Yeah,
Right there.
it's just a great classic film. Love it.
And that will be your 15th appearance, so you'll have to figure out what 15 means for guests as far as swag and branding and whatnot. But any parting words you'd like to share?
I don't know, Tom, you caught me speechless. Probably not.
First time.
What?
First time. We have it recorded. It is video documented. It will be up in the public sphere very, very soon. Okay. And Dad's so stunned himself he's speechless, so let's skip some final thoughts for the week, because I don't really have any, and he's just now being goofy on. So if you want to see this, you can see it on YouTube. I guess that might be some incentive for you to go and watch the end of the video, but that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. They are nice because they are rich. Next week, for our 232nd episode, we welcome back Peterson W. Hill and our previous two-time guest, Terry Bartley, to discuss Parasite for its 5th anniversary. Written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, with Han Jin-won, music by Jung Jae-il, starring Song Kang-ho, Lee Sun-kyun, Cho Yo Jong, and Choi Woo Shik. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at thenewRonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ryan Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.